So picture this. Jeff Keighley, out of the goodness of his own heart, puts Highguard in the final biggest slot of the Game Awards show, literally the biggest gaming show of the year, for free. Tencent is on the advisory board of the Game Awards. Tencent were also the secret investor behind Highguard. Oh, dearie me. Come with me. This is insane. So Stephen Titolo, basically he's got the scoop on this, and Polygon is reporting this. Again, there's links to all of this in the video description below. But basically, as Highguard's funding secretly came from Tencent, a new report claims. This is crazy, because remember what Highguard was saying. We are a studio of game developers that are trying to escape the corporate machine by founding our own studio, and then we're backed by Tencent, the biggest, right? The absolute biggest gaming publisher on the planet, right? The irony of this is just crazy. But anyway, it's no secret that Highguard had a seriously rocky launch. Highguard is basically dead as well. Like, beyond no illusion, this game is not coming back. Everyone associated with the game has essentially been fired, and there's a skeleton crew left like to keep the game running. But the bloody website for the game is offline as well. There's just loads of shit going on with this game. It's absolutely crazy. And they're like, what boggles the mind? What boggles the mind here is how the hell, even if, you know, what business plan has no runway after like 2 weeks? It's like, no, sorry, it's not working. That's it. Quick, cancel the game. We spent years developing it with the most insanely expensive, you know, Southern Californian dev salaries. Although it must be said that for Highguard, I'm not too sure they were at the top like whack, because they were giving them equity and, you know, profit share units and things like that in the game, because if the game did well, then they would obviously get more of that, you know, money profit back. But I don't think anyone clearly thought, well, some people obviously thought this game was going to do well. And again, there's also the whole element of, and I don't think I touched on this in recent videos, but sometimes you just work at a job, you know it's not going anywhere, but you work at a job, you get your head down and you get it done. Probably that was going on as well. You know, you've got salary for a few years, let's work on this thing, off we go. Probably not great. Anyway, who knows what truly happened, but it's no secret that Highguard had a rocky launch. What had been a secret until today, and again, why was this a secret? Like, why would you, like, hello, why would you keep this a secret? We're funding by Tencent, don't tell anyone. Oh dear. The struggling Raid shooter got its funding. The game's developer and publisher, Wildlight Entertainment, has repeatedly referred to the game as fully funded, but never disclosed that a majority of that funding came from China's gaming powerhouse, Tencent, according to anonymous sources who spoke to GameFile journalist Stephen Titolo. But anyway, Tencent was the game's biggest financial backer. Tencent is the world's largest video game company with a massive investment portfolio, including games like PUBG Mobile and League of Legends. It also holds stakes in a number of international gaming companies, including Epic, Ubisoft, and many more. Per anonymous sources familiar with the arrangement, Tencent's Teamy Studio group was responsible for backing Highguard's development. The reason for the secrecy regarding the arrangement is unclear. I mean, it's not. It's obviously because it would have negative connotations, right? That's why. The reason for the secrecy, blah, blah, blah. It is not known exactly how much Teamy contributed to the project, though Tatilio. Stephen, I am so sorry about your name. Let me pronounce this name correctly, because I sound like an idiot and I'm not doing you justice. No, I apologize. I'm just an idiot. I literally can't even say your name, so I apologize. Where were we in this thing? I've totally lost my mind. Okay, so we were kind of here and then we're here. Right, okay, so Stephen's sources indicated it was a significant amount of funding. Highguard was first announced via a trailer during the finale of the 2025's Game Awards, a spot which Wildlight says was offered to the studio for free by host and creator Jeff Keighley. Keighley appeared to be quite excited about the upcoming game, which he personally playtested. Tencent's senior vice president, Stephen Ma, is a member of the Game Awards advisory board. Neither Wildlight Entertainment nor Tencent have disclosed the partnership publicly, and while we don't know exactly how much it cost to make Highguard, one can imagine it was not cheap. The game launched with extensive plans for future seasons, beautifully animated lore cinematics, and seemed poised to continue rolling out updates despite largely negative reception for players. Wildlight has 2 physical locations, one in LA, another in Seattle. Until recent layoffs reduced it to a skeleton crew of developers. The studio had about 100 employees, many of whom were former Respawn Entertainment developers. It's unclear if Tencent played a part in the studio's decision to lay off so many employees so soon after launch. Early today, Highguard's official website appears to be taken offline. And again, just to drill this home, Highguard did not pay for that final slot. This was reported by Paul Tassi over on Forbes. This is back from earlier this year, January the 17th. Highguard did not pay for its infamous Game Awards finale slot because, of course, everyone at the time, I mean, obviously we all know what happened, but it was like, these devs are clearly delusional because the game doesn't look like it's going to be a world beater. It looks like it's like an okay game. I don't think Highguard was particularly trash or terrible. I think it's got some nice little elements to it. But obviously it was never going to be a world beater. Anyone could see that. And it was very confusing that the devs would seemingly pay millions and millions of dollars because it's stupidly expensive for a trailer slot just in the show normally at the Game Awards. So the final slot, it's going to be loads, right? But then it turned out it was just given to them magically for free. Then we had this, right? Because this was the developers and the studio lead saying, no, actually, we were just going to shadow drop this game. But Jeff, he had another idea. And we were like, that wasn't our plan. But like, are we going to turn down the exposure? Now, in gaming history, this is going to be looked back as one of those moments where it was like, well, like I firmly believe when it comes to this, they, I think if the game just shadow dropped, it wouldn't have hit the highs that it's got or it achieved, let's say, but it would still be at the lows, right? So the highs wouldn't have been like nearly 100,000, like 96,000 or something, right? Whatever it was. But the decline would still be there, right? So maybe it would have only gone up to 10, 15,000 and then dropped down. I don't think there was enough, there's just not enough in this game to draw people in to create the sort of mad experience that we all had with Apex Legends, which was like a crazy drop. That was great. And obviously they were trying to replicate that. But Jeff comes in for unknown reasons, clearly enough to do with Tencent, and goes, you know what? It's fine. I'm going to give you the best slot for free because I love you guys and I love your game. It all seems a little bit too good to be true, doesn't it, this? Okay, this is Stephen Totilo's website. Right, I can say your name sometimes. This is GameFile. It's over on Substack, but there's a link to this in the video description below. Go and check it out. But this is where it first all broke. Tencent secretly funded struggling shooter Highguard. Wildlight Entertainment has said for years it was fully funded, but they didn't share details. So what if you try and go to the Highguard website? Now remember, there's a skeleton crew keeping the game alive. This is the website. It just says site unavailable. The site is currently unavailable. Please contact support@code32.com. Now Code32, well, I'll show you their website, but they're just a game, they're just a website development company that makes websites for gaming companies. Yeah, so these guys, this is why a lot of gaming websites all look the same with that same scrolly thing, because they just, I think, what's their pricing? Yeah, maybe we should go into this business. But don't worry, because it's not as bad as it seems, because one of the devs over on the Discord server said this, not sure, like somebody said, what's up with the website? Is it being updated? And they say not sure on a time frame, but basically needs to be transferred and simplified. Low priority at the mo, reputational damage already done. Now we just need to focus on delivering updates and content to improve. But like, I get the devs want to do that, but if everyone's been fired and there's no funding left, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? So then I started thinking, what happens if we go to Wildlight's actual website, not the Highguard website? This is their website. There's no mention of anything here, like, you know, who they're backed by or anything. It's just like Highguard. You know, to most people, it just looks like, yeah, it is a self-funded thing. You know, it isn't this thing which is actually backed by Tencent. So how are games funded, right? Now, this is a very complex topic, and I'm not saying Tencent have 100% funded Highguard's development and Wildlight Studios, but funding comes from a lot of different sources. So, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't actually say this. I think there's a bit of a scam on the go in California, if I'm honest, especially with game developers, where you can say, I've worked at Blizzard, and then you can get your mates together who also worked at Blizzard, get a shitload of VC funding, piss off for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, make a game, the game flops, but oh well, we've paid ourselves top whack, so we're fine. Like, what is that? Like, that's crazy. Obviously, the venture capital are coming in thinking, these are developers with pedigree, we want them to work on the next big thing. But what seems to be the case is the devs from Blizzard, EA, and all these places, most of the time, they don't really seem to hit the jackpot again. Now, obviously, game development is incredibly hard. hitting the jackpot is a very rare thing. And obviously a lot of investment has gone into that. And yeah, so sometimes when people are like, yeah, it's sad the devs lose their job. It is. Don't get me wrong. It absolutely is. I'm not advocating for anyone to lose their job. But I think there are a lot of them out there that have been sitting on pretty cushy jobs. I've got to say it. Like, I honestly think that's the case. Okay, so how are they funded? If you want to put your game studio together. Now, I'm not saying this is actually easy. Okay, I need to really clarify this. I'm not saying this is easy to do now. In fact, I think this is going to be a lot harder to do now. But a lot of these games have been in development for years. So they got their funding way before AI. Because you've got to think about AI. That's where the investors want to go now. You know, all that kind of stuff, right? You get these trends. And gaming for a while was a trend. And it seems to me that it was definitely a trend to get the big name devs from ex-big studios who've worked on massive titles to come in and work on a game and give them, you know, a couple $100 million and let them make the next big thing. So when you set your company up, you need to get funding unless you're just incredibly wealthy yourself and can fund the whole thing, which is very rare. And even in those cases, most of the people with the money to do it themselves won't use their own money, right? They'll just use investors' money anyway. So you go out and you look for VC, which is venture capital, early stage funding, seed funding. You have different rounds of this. So you may get, you know, a first round comes in, it's enough money to set the business up, you start building stuff, and then, hey, look, we've got this game. We think it's going to do well. You show it off to other investors. You have another round of funding and things can maybe get a bit bigger. You can upscale a bit, right? That's kind of what goes on. Now, this is Christopher Dring, the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Game Business. Now, I want to read what he says because it's a bit... yeah, let's just read this and then we'll go through it. So when a big independent studio forms, they typically go through funding rounds where they ask investors to support their project and studio. Various groups can invest in these rounds. Historically, Tencent has been a regular investor in new teams. You'd be surprised at how many other devs have secret but not actually secret Tencent backing. So again, I believe that's true, right? There's going to be other people out there that don't want to say they are backed by Tencent, again, for reasons. Games require funds to be made. Being backed by investors doesn't make you any less independent. Heck, a lot of the time, the investment isn't even enough to cover everything. Multiple rounds are usually required, and even then, it might need a publisher. So, firstly, we don't know what the level of investment was, and we don't know how much money Wildlight had. But when, you know, if it's just a small amount, 5%, 10% of overall funding of the game that Tencent provided, then maybe, yeah, they're not going to have much of an impact. But we don't know. Imagine if it was 90%. You know, or you provided 70% of the funding. Wouldn't you then want input on the thing you are funding, right? I'm pretty sure you would. So when this guy says games require funds to be made, being backed by investors doesn't make you any less independent, it does. It really, really does. Because you're not going to sit there and be like, oh, well, tough shit. It's going wrong, you know. Or I don't like what they're going to do with this game because they're not going to make enough money. I want them to put more microtransactions in, do this, do that. So I don't agree with that. I think that's not correct. Tencent and similar investors are not a well of money people can keep coming back to. In most cases, it's some funds to get going, and then it's on the developers to deliver the rest, which again, you know, I think that's fine. Like I said, we don't know the funding. It's just crazy that Wildlight were going around saying we're fully funded, almost implying like, you know, we've funded ourselves and everything's going to be fine. But actually, they weren't. And what is even crazier is however the management were to put that company together and how they handled the funds is insane, because literally after 2 weeks, it was time to massively scale back the game and go into, you know, basically maintenance mode, getting ready to shut down, which is mental. So what about these links to the Game Awards, right? So the Game Awards itself, it's very debatable whether this is actually, you know, certain things are getting picked, right, for awards, and it's like, whatever. But this is the advisory panel. Now, obviously, there's tons of people on this, right? You can see this. I mean, there's literally, you know, Lisa Su from AMD is on this, right? Activision's president, you know. So you could say any time, like, oh, an Activision game or an EA game or Epic Games wins, then it's been bought, right? But on here, obviously, is Tencent, and it is important to make this connection. So this is Stephen Ma. I will attempt to say the Chinese name, but it's Ma Zhaoyi. I've got that totally wrong. I apologize. But he's a senior vice president. And Stephen joined Tencent in 2007. It was promoted to senior vice president by 2013. So this is not somebody who is, you know, a nobody. He's one of the big wigs in Tencent. So yeah, look, listen. Wildlight were funded by Tencent. Majority of the funding came from Tencent, according to Stephen's reporting. Now, what this means for the game's future is clearly the funds have ran out. Now, these funds could have been used to develop the game, and then there was no funds left for actual runway. So they can't keep developing the game going forward. It is most likely the management at Wildlight thought, we've got a great game. We know they thought their game was great. We've covered all the stuff from one of the ex-developers who's now deleted all their social accounts and everything for basically blaming us as gamers for the reason the game failed, not the fact it was mediocre and had glaring issues. But we believe they were in a bubble. So they thought their game was great. They obviously were able to convince other people the game was great. Now, they clearly convinced Jeff Keighley in some fashion that it was great. So he put it in the end of the Game Awards. Now, obviously, the connections between Jeff and Tencent are clearly there. But like I said, they could be quite murky. And it literally could just be the case that Jeff looked at the game and thought, this is great. I want to give it some exposure. But again, remember, it's funded by Tencent. Tencent are on the advisory board. And Jeff Keighley is an industry, a big wig mover. He's got a lot of connections going on. I've seen the man. At one of the Overwatch League things way back years ago at Burbank, I've seen him dealing with a lot of people, and it was like, yeah, this man is a good networker, let's say. But like, this is just insane. Like, Highguard had clearly a plan where they needed to generate money immediately through microtransactions, and they were not going to do that. They didn't get the required player base. They didn't get there's no retention. So why would people spend money on monetization and cosmetics? And then now, when people see all of the news, the game studio has literally been laid off. Why now would you ever spend money on this game? So it's going to come down to a few factors here. Number one, the cost to keep the servers running, whatever that may be. I don't think that's going to be incredible amounts of numbers because, well, there's not a lot of traffic going into the servers, let's be real. Back in the old days, it used to be very expensive to run your own gaming servers, dedicated servers and stuff like that. Now it's not so bad. They use a lot of cloud providers, AWS and things like that. They can scale up pretty quick. They do that kind of thing. On the other sort of end of the spectrum is you're not, well, it's not even the other end of the spectrum. It's the same spectrum. You are not going to buy cosmetics in the game that you know is winding down because the player base is reducing in number. Less people to buy cosmetics, less money. Money's running out. We then can't afford to pay whatever developers we've got left. We need to let them go. We cannot run this game. The game's offline. That's what's going to happen to Highguard. And I think everyone knew ultimately this was going to be the case. Even though, I think it was mediocre is the best. It was mediocre in a world where it could not afford to be mediocre. The competition is way too big to deal with that, and they just never would make any inroads. Although they really should have launched with 5v5. The fact they didn't was crazy, which shows what were the game designers doing. Like, how did they think 3v3 would be a good idea? And anyway, all right, guys, this is probably the last video on Highguard, unless we finally get confirmation that it is gone and finished completely. Then maybe we'll look at that if it's a catastrophic collapse or something insane happens. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I've been Stylosa. You can follow me on everything, which is @Stylosa. And I'll catch you lovely lot on the next video. See you soon.